and we're glad that you made it tonight. And we've just got 2 more sessions, and we'll be done with this subject. But I reflected coming over tonight. I hope and I think that you're sharp and aware enough that the dynamics and the principles in this subject presentation are so very applicable to this church right now. Right now. Because you're in transition and you're growing, and good signs, good things are happening. But I hope you're making the connection that this is not some disconnected subject matter about, well, you know, just put it over in the academic pile where it's good to know, but it doesn't mean anything. It has no application. I hope and think that you're clicking those together without me stopping and saying, now this means this to you in this situation. There's just so much here that's connecting, and I visited at length with Pastor Denny about that particular thing, and he was very excited. He's watching online and knows that this material just connects to you so perfectly, so well. I hesitate to say perfect because, you know, not every single thing does everything. For someone, and maybe it's not for today, but in the very near future, in the next a few months, even before the end of the year, some of these things are going to be happening, and I trust that you'll keep Nehemiah up on the front burner, you know what I mean, mentally, and reflect upon the things that we have studied in these few weeks together. Tonight we're in chapter 5. I trust that you read ahead and at least got an idea of what chapter 5 is about in the progress of rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem, and we're very near completion. It's amazing what Nehemiah has accomplished with his crew in spite of strong opposition and even hostile opposition. Because we've touched on a couple of things with the surrounding governors, Sanballat and Tobiah. There's a lot of resistance going on to get this accomplished. There are some people that teach and believe that when everything goes smooth, that's proof that God is in it. That's not necessarily the case. That's not proof. I know some others that present, if you're having a lot of problems, that means the devil is fighting you and you're doing the right thing. And that's not true either. You are, each of us is capable of doing it wrong. And that might be, you know, it's easy to blame somebody else for the bad things that are happening, because it sure wouldn't be me, right? I mean, we don't want that to happen. But neither one of those is true. You can have difficulties when you're right in the perfect will of God, doing exactly what He wants you to do. I had one kind of knucklehead guy approach me, and he liked to go into Mexico. This is some years ago, and go to the big Catholic churches in the big cities and pass out anti-Catholic material and Christian tracts, and you know, I mean, he just rubbing their nose in it. And I said, Melvin, you're going to get in trouble down there. You know, this is not America in Mexico. And he said, well, you know, I think that's what Paul did, and he went and he confronted and he, you know, taught against some things. And I said, yeah, but you know, Paul is dead. You know, there was some resistance that caused his death from the government, and his charge was being a Christian. That was his dangerous charge. He was preaching the gospel that was interpreted as anti-government and anti-societal values, and oh dear, I hate that. Does somebody else want to talk to these people? Sorry. So having struggles and difficulties doesn't mean you're doing the wrong thing. And there are some tests that are allowed to come to us or even against us that are just for that purpose, for testing. You know, are you serious? Are you dedicated? Are you in this for the short term, or are you really locked in for the long haul? But Nehemiah and his work crew, and I think most of you will grip this properly. This is a non-professional construction crew. There's no masons on the crew. There are no carpenters on the crew. There's no finish carpenters there. There's no framers. There's nobody there that has construction experience. None of them. But what they're doing in working together, working God's plan in God's time, they are actually doing the impossible. Say, well, you know, we really need somebody that's a professional to do these certain things at church. No, you don't. Sometimes it's better, but there's some displaced confidence that can develop if you do have experience, if you do have education, if you do have qualifications. But that doesn't mean it guarantees success, or we can do what God has committed us to do. He takes the unqualified and he does something miraculous, both in your life and then with your life. And you accomplish far more than you could if you were a professional at whatever you do. So the human key, and this is part of it because we referred to the God key, of course. This doesn't work if God doesn't, have it in His mind for you to do. But your response is important as well. And the human key we touched on last week in chapter 4, verse 6. The people had a mind or a heart to work. It doesn't say that they were efficient, proficient, professional. They got it done in record time, or it just says they had a heart to work. And if we do, God can guide us, He can empower us, He can supply us, He can make things happen even at the hands of people that are amateurs. Or we've never done this before. Well, yeah, but after this is over, we'll say we did it once. And some great things can happen when God's revealed will is understood and the people, that's us, respond with a heart to work. Things that are considered impossibilities become actualized and realized with God's guidance, His help, and the application of men and women. You've probably heard that God's will is going to happen. Period. Really? What if I don't cooperate? Will it happen? Will His best for me develop if I don't cooperate and obey? What if I rebel? Then, as strong as God's will is that really going to happen? He'll just go find somebody else. His will develop, but not necessarily in my life. I can say no. I can say I want to do it slow. I can say this is too expensive. This costs too much. Now, I'm not talking about just dollars. I'm talking about the toll of ministry. I don't want to give up these things. We'll talk about sacrificing your rights toward the end tonight. But God's will isn't necessarily going to happen in everybody's life if they don't cooperate. It may not get done by you. God will get his things done, but he may have to get somebody else. In teaching in Bible college, and I've had the privilege of teaching in 20 so far, and that'll probably be all that I'm in, maybe 21, but 20 so far. I caution the young preacher students that are very ambitious, very idealistic, you can imagine, from 20 to 25, how folks are to see themselves as successful ministers and how polished up their ego gets. And you know the picture of the basketball coach going down the bench to find somebody that's going to fit the situation. And I've always admired those guys coming off the bench cold and popping in. Steve Kerr for the Chicago Bulls, come in the third quarter, cold, start hitting three-point shots. How do you do that? I mean, that is no warm-up, just, pull your sweats off and go in the game. But God goes down the row, so to speak, until he finds who he needs and who is willing to go. And so there's an assumption, especially by the young, that when God calls you, and there is a very dynamic and special experience that happens to a lot of people. It doesn't happen to every single person, but it happens in different ways. When the call of God is realized and comes upon your life, and there's an assumption that's not good by the individual that God called you first. Maybe not. Maybe he called some other people that were better qualified, better educated, that were prettier or more handsome and had more money than you and could have done it. But they said no. They said, no thanks. I've got my life set the way I want and I can't be bothered with that. And so he keeps looking until he gets somebody that responds to the call, but don't assume you were the first one that was called. Does that put your ego in a proper place? It does for me. It helps me. That, why did he call me to do this? Well, other people said no.
First one to say yes.
Yeah, exactly. And, if God calls you and empowers you, you are qualified. You are, and you just do the best you can. And he somehow backfills and does the rest. I worked for a short time as a bodyguard for Catherine Kuhlman. I don't know if you know who she is or not. She's dead now, but in the last century, she was a person who had an unusual manifestation of healing in her meetings. The meetings where I was with her typically would be a 15,000 seat arena, and they would lock the doors at 6 o'clock and not let anybody else in, because the fire marshal gets upset when you pack the house like we like to do. And she didn't speak very clearly. She was frail. She was skinny. She was just an old spinster. Does anybody know Catherine Kuhlman?
She was anointed.
Yes.
Great.
Yes. She couldn't preach. She tried. But at some point in her lame sermon, she would stop, drop the sermon. I mean, drop it. It's gone forever. And go, in this section right back here, there's some people being healing of arthritis. If you'll stand up, God will heal you. She'd point to the place where they brought in beds and wheelchairs and go, in this section right here, there's someone who, and she would describe in very great detail a healing that was happening if you will believe and stand up and claim that. And thousands, I'm not stretching it, thousands of people would be healed before the service was over. And no more sermon. I mean, it was, that's gone, because that's not why we're here. We didn't come to hear her preach, but I was a bodyguard for her for a short time, and just amazing. She was so underqualified. And the Houston Post came. Is that Hale getting us?
No, we've got a tree right there.
Oh, it is. Oh, good. Houston Post, who's not a friendly magazine, came to her for an interview and said, among other things, because they were looking for an attack piece and material, that there are those in your group that don't approve of women preachers. And she smiled real sweetly, and they said, can you explain to us in your Pentecostal group why you, a woman, are preaching? And she was so sweet about it. She said, well, all I know is this, that somewhere, sometime, a man said no. And she left it at that. And, what a great answer. I'm not the first one he called, but I'm the first one, like you said, first one that said yes. And, if God calls her, how is she going to tell God, I can't do this, I'm a woman. Yes, we've got people here with rules. And God says, give me their names, I'll work on them. I'll take care of those boys. So anyway, that was just a little extra thing. But there's, in chapter 5, it's kind of a dark chapter as far as the development, but I think it's an important chapter to see what happened here, because we see the most hindering and destructive force that probably exists, and that is greed, selfishness, and opportunism, not from the enemy outside the wall, because we expect them to be skunks, but from the men inside the wall, the people that we would probably mistakenly call brethren, from brothers. Now, I'm questioning their status at this point and making a judgment call, and I hope you understand why. Their behavior says they're not part of the community, that they're not part of the brethren that is working under God's direction with Nehemiah. But it seems that always hovering around emergencies and disasters are the ever-present vultures. And you've seen it financially, you've seen it in real estate, you've seen it in roofers, you've seen it in car repair, you've seen it in lots of areas that suddenly there's a connection between it. People hanging around where there's a disaster, and they begin to take opportunity to take advantage of people that are in a bad situation or in a true calamity. And they take advantage of them, and you understand. Here we have the example of men in the community taking advantage of others in need. You would think that those godly people in Israel, in Jerusalem, would pull together, but there's always, it seems, at least for now, some element, some number of people who will take advantage of others that are having difficulty. I want to do something kind of dangerous, and I think you'll understand. Think of the worst Christian that you know. See, that's not a good place to go, and I realize that. Think of the worst Christian that you know. Their attitude, their testimony, their practice, just not good. But they claim. Is that God's fault? That they are the way they are? Because there are those looking for an excuse outside the church to say, oh, if he's a Christian, I don't want anything to do with it. And when they've laid that on me, I just said, I agree with you. If that's what a Christian is, I'm out. Stop the bus and let me off. I have no interest in being like this guy. And I'm sorry if that crosses the line into judgmentalism, My attitude is not judgmental, but that's not God's fault. Another way of approach that I have used is, I've asked for a show of hands. I won't do it tonight, but you'll get the point. How many here tonight have been hurt in church, somewhere, sometime? Join the club. And if you be honest and look around at such a time, you'll find that just about everybody has. And you, if you haven't, you're just brand new. Because it's going to happen. But you know, it's not God's fault. Jesus didn't do that. Everything good in your life is what Jesus has done. If you've had some bad experiences, people did that. People did it. Now, they may have been in the pulpit, they may have been on the musical instruments, they may have been a teacher, preacher, something, but it's people that do the bad stuff in church, not God. It's, you know, people get upset with their pastor or with people and then take it out on the pastor or take it out in their resentment toward God. I've got one I'm trying to deal with in my own family, a young person that has been hurt and the rebellion is against God. Well, God didn't do anything bad to you, ever. Hello? Ever. There's nothing bad that God has done, nor will do, in your development of testimony. Well, there's two cautions here, and I want you to take these as real. They can develop, but they shouldn't. And that first one is a caution about compassion fatigue. It has to do with having sympathy or compassion for so many victims that I run out of being able emotionally to treat the next one. And there are those that are in emergency services, people that work in the ER at the hospital, and other crisis responders that have to be rotated out every so often. Because what happens is they give and they give and they give in their compassion to, let's just look at the ER for a moment, for patients that have some crisis. And when they run out of compassion, they become dangerous to the patients because they do not care. They run out of patience, compassion, and they become a dangerous medical worker or spiritual worker, either one. When you get to the point where you don't care, you got to take a break. You got to get away from that for not only your own good, but for the good of the people that you're trying to help. Nehemiah did not have compassion fatigue. He has worked and worked and worked, and yet he still has it. And so it's a human thing, so don't think that it'll never happen to you or that it's great calamity if it does. Take a break. Get away from that. You can only deal with frontline emergencies so long emotionally and until you don't have anything left. But you can retreat, you can reflect, you can build it back up and then go back into it. The other caution has to do with what I call indignation fatigue. And that is fighting evil and unrighteousness, fighting bad things for so long you wear out and kind of give up and say, well, that's just the way the world is today. Some people are like that. And Nehemiah still has the ability to identify something that is wrong and get angry. So, oh no, you're never supposed to get angry. There's nowhere in the scripture that says that. Do you know that? It doesn't say that never get angry, never lose your temper. It says, don't let the sun go down on your wrath. Don't carry it with you and give yourself an ulcer overnight. Get it resolved if you're upset for the right reason. There is evil in the world that I believe you need to have some level of indignation about. That this is clearly wrong. This is destroying people. This is against the revealed will of God. This is against Scripture. And I'm not happy about it. And I'm not going to just let it go without at least a comment. At least expressing, you'll find yourself shouting at the TV at some point. I'm guilty. They never listen to me. But you understand there has to be some kind of an outlet. Nehemiah did not let either one of these two conditions. He still had the ability for compassion to care about people in need. For a situation, I was watching some kind of a little clip of a movie recently, and here's a cop on the run, but then he's going by on the street and there's a mugging, and the woman is crying out, help me, help me. And he needs to keep going, for his own interest, but he can't. He has to stop and take care of these guys and rescue that woman out of the situation. It was really simple, but he cared. He just cared. He cared more for other people for the moment to do something than his own self-interest would be. And then there are still things in the world to get upset about. And, if you can use that as some motivation, some source of energy, fighting evil is not just for superheroes. It's something that each one of us has to keep in mind. And the closer it comes to our family and our church, we need to turn it on and not wear out. So in verses 6 through 13, there is something called condemnation of the nobles, or we're not really used to that word, the ruling class. In this case, they were men who are in the ruling class of Jerusalem. And in verse 6, now Nehemiah is in charge of writing this down. So it's not like there's some heckling reporter on the side noticing things. Nehemiah is in charge of what's recorded. And in verse 6 it says, Nehemiah is angry, very angry. Uh-oh. Well, I'm not upset that he's upset, but he knows it. He knows he's angry because he's discovered some things, some conditions that he wasn't aware of until this moment. And he's angry, but the very next verse tells us what is on his agenda. What do you do first? Some let their right fist, or their mouth. First thing that Nehemiah does when he knows he's angry, he withdraws. I'm going to reflect. I'm going to think about my response so that I do not react and punch these guys out. Because that's not what's needed. Are you with me? That hardly ever helps the situation, because now you've got an additional problem of your own out of control thing. He's going to withdraw from the situation and think this through. What's the real answer here? I'm upset. I think something should be done. I think something should be said. But what? And I don't know if you've experienced this, but I'll admit that I have. That I've been in confrontational discussions in the church aisle, and then on the way home, I think, I should have said this, right? Oh, now I think of the perfect response, but it was way too late. I needed to think of that then. Nehemiah pulls himself back. He knows he's angry, but you don't want to make a bad decision while you're angry. You don't. I don't know how much you enjoy saying, I'm sorry, I'll never do that again. I don't like that. I don't like to apologize. As a result, I'm careful with what I say because I really don't want to hurt you and then apologize. So let's just think about this first. So the shocking discovery is this. There are people lending money during this crisis, and that is against the law. It's against the law of Moses. In Deuteronomy, or in Leviticus 25 and in Exodus 22, if you want some references, I can give you the verses if you want them, that speak about interest with the brethren. Now, if you're in business to loan money, you're not displeasing God, or, if there's an agreement. And we don't live in the Old Testament. We're not living under the law of Moses, but these people are. So they have to respect that. But they are loaning money to the brothers and charging them interest, and Moses says, you don't charge interest to the brothers. You do that to other people that are outside the ark of safety. They were also foreclosing on homes and income-producing property where there had been loans that were unpaid, and so they took their property, and they even were purchasing indentured servants. Now, this is not a fancy term for slavery. Slavery really developed in about 1675 and pretty much overtook the indentured servant industry. Those that are slaves against their will. Okay? But an indentured servant is one who willingly goes into an arrangement. And in this case, and this was common then, it's not now, that I can no longer feed my family. I don't have the money to feed my family. So I have 2 sons that can work. Can I give them to you for 10 years only? You'll treat them well, you will provide housing, and you'll provide food for them, but they're my sons. That's not slavery, right? Are you with me on this thought? I don't know if you know about indentured servanthood or not. Some people have indentured themselves through the centuries, not lately. I'm down, I have nothing, I've had problems, or maybe I'm just out of prison and I have nothing to build upon. I'll work for you for room and board and no pay. I just need to get started. I've got to start over again. In this case, it's the children that are able-bodied and able to do some work, but we don't need any work in this household. They need to go to your household, and you essentially take care of my kids for 10 years, and then you give them back. So this isn't selling them into slavery. That's a whole different thing, and I've been involved in some of that, not on the bad side, on the good side of bringing them back, and the slavery that exists in conditions in the world today. I can tell you about that another day. But what Nehemiah found out was the chargers of interest, the people who are foreclosing on property, both homes and income-producing property, rent houses, if you will, and accepting the indentured servant situation, are brethren. These are the guys in the congregation that we go to church with, on Sabbath. Are you kidding me? I would expect this from the low-class enemy, but I didn't expect that from inside the house, inside the family. He confronted them in public. In verse 8, he tells these men, we have been buying the children back as fast as we can. They've gone out. Now, maybe there was some money involved, but normally there was not. It was not for money. But he's been personally buying these children back out of indentured slavery, back to be restored to their family. You know, you guys are doing the stuff that I've been trying to work against. And when confronted with the morality of their actions in public, not only did they not defend themselves, they don't even have anything to say. Nothing. They don't even say, yeah, but. They knew it was wrong. And when confronted by here God's obviously ordained leader, they just don't have anything to say. They're guilty. So in verse 9, there's something very important that deals with the outside testimony of a believer, that there's a reason to practice charity beyond the limit instead of legality, to be gracious, to be generous in situations. Did you know that there are people around you? There may be some in your classroom, in your workplace, in your home, your extended family, that are watching your testimony without your permission. They have not come to you and said, I want to watch how a Christian conducts himself, especially in the testing, not in the feast days, on the other problems. I want to see how you operate. Nobody asks permission to watch you, but let me assure you, they're watching. They're watching how you act, how you react, how you respond, how you live your life. It was kind of funny. One night we were preparing. This is pastoring in Alaska, and in the summertime, you hear basketball being bounced till past midnight because the sun's still up. And won't those kids ever go to bed? Kids are out all the time. I got the energy and the motivation. And so I was backing out of our driveway carefully, but I heard this little 5-year-old girl that was in the neighborhood, and she was the boss of the other little girl, she thought. You know how that works. And she said, oh, move over here. These people are church people. Which explained why we were dressed up and backing out of the driveway on a Wednesday night. She knew. I mean, I'd never talked to that 5-year-old girl. She knew. She'd heard that at home. Those are church people. That explains their strange habits. Wednesday night, they're going to back out and go to church. So just be careful here while they back out. And I thought that was so cute, so funny, but so telling. Here's the neighbors knew when we were not home. And you know what? In my limited knowledge, but I do know a lot of people, thousands of people, I don't know one Christian believer that's had their house broken into while they've been at church. I'm just saying. Don't you think that's a little unusual? I mean, they know when you're not going to be there. Yep, he's church guy. He'll be gone on Sunday morning. We could break in and steal his stereo. It doesn't happen. Now, it probably has somewhere, sometime, but I'm not aware of it. It's just amazing that the knuckleheads that live in my neighborhood know I'm going to be gone on Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday, whatever the schedule is. It doesn't take long to figure that out. You know what I mean? Those are church people. Watch out there. Well, people are watching, and for you to go a little farther in your generosity than is legally demanding is a good thing. Be generous. Let me just focus on this for a second. I've mentioned a few weeks ago about eating out. I don't eat out as much as I used to, but I still enjoy it as much as I used to. But one of the things I really don't like is to find out that food service workers don't like working on Sunday. You know why? Church people have a reputation of being cheap on their tips. Ask them. Ask somebody you know that works in the food industry. They don't want to work on Sunday. They come in, they expect all kinds of things, and then they leave a handful of change. And I have developed relationship with waiters and waitresses, and I'm known for over-tipping. I get good service, I can tell you that, because they know when I come back in, I'm going to take care of them. And I don't want to fall into that category of, oh, here come those Christians, and we're going to get shorted. They're going to leave 50 cents for a $100 lunch bill. And a mess, yeah. And no apology. Like, let me help you clean this up or something. That's just a little raw nerve in my life that I am generous when I go out to eat. And I've warned several people. I said, now you're going to think that I'm flirting with this waitress, but I'm not. I need to know the people that touch my food. And I'm going to order stuff that's not on the menu. And I expect to get it. And I'm willing to pay for it. I have a friend that has a restaurant in northern Pakistan, and I'm looking through his menu one day, and it must have had 15 pages of stuff. American food and Pakistani food and some Chinese. And there's just so much to order here. He comes by, big smile, and he says, these are just suggestions. You tell me what you want, and we will fix it. And I went, I think I just learned something right there. These are just suggestions. I'll just tell him what I want. But you got to be willing to pony up. Are you with me? No, you don't have to do this. This is not proof that you're, practicing good Christianity. It's just one of the things that I have chosen to do. But I order stuff that's not on the menu. I want a big bowl of this, and I want a side of that and something else, and I'll make it worth your while. Just bring me what I want. Have you ever wanted to do that? That they just didn't give you what you wanted. I'm off the subject. John 13:35. Jesus says, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples if you have love one to another. And I hope that you'll take that one little word to heart. Having one love, one for another, is different than one love to another. To is the demonstration of that love. For is all internal. And don't be like the lady that closed her eyes and looked around and just said, well, I just love everybody I see. That ain't it. Not only do we need to have love for the brothers, we need to have love to them. That's action. There's something going on. That's enough on that. Nehemiah, verses 10 through 12, then demands. He didn't ask. He demands. He's the governor in charge of the territory, and he's in charge of this project, and he's the big guy here. Let me tell you, he is the big boss, and he demands from these rich men that have been abusive and have done wrong. He tells them what they are going to do now. Not a suggestion, not advice, not, well, let's see, brother, here's what I think, but you could pray about that and see. He's saying, here's what you guys are going to do now. And they're going to go, okay. Number one, stop lending money for interest to your brothers. Stop it. Second, Any interest that you have collected in the past since I've been here, give it back. If you have foreclosed on any property, any houses, any rent houses, any land, give it back. And you will, won't you? And they're going, yeah, just, this guy's hot. And he's in charge. So he tells them what they're going to do. The conduct of Nehemiah is very important here. And this plays into exactly what I was describing about people watching you, whether you know it or not. Verse 14, we're still in chapter 5, refers to the governor's salary. He's been appointed by the king back in Babylon to be governor, and there's a salary involved. Should be no surprise to you on that, except the surprise is that Nehemiah is not accepting it. He's not taking that salary. It's there, it's legal, and it's appropriate. But he's saying, no, thank you. I'm doing a labor of love here. I'm doing because I'm called by God to do this. And there wouldn't be anything wrong with him taking that salary. Are you with me? If he's got some bills to pay and he's got expenses and stuff, but apparently he is self-sufficient. In verse 15, there are what we would call fringe benefits and an expense account that goes with being the governor. No surprise. The fringe package and the allowable expenses? Nehemiah says, don't need any of that. Don't need that. It's theirs, legitimate, it stays. He didn't do away with it for the next governor. See, there's one of the bad mistakes, that he does away with it and then the next guy starves to death. And don't do that to people. But if it's your prerogative, then in verse 16, can you imagine the fluctuation during this conflict on land prices? In this case, they're fluctuating low. Now, I don't know if you're aware of what's happening in the real estate market in America, and certainly in this town. Yeah. Everything is sky high, and you know what? There's a lineup of people wanting to buy what you've got, and they're bidding more than you ask for. And I've been in contact with some agents even just recently, and they're saying, here's the market price, but you better bring something better than that number or you're not going to get it, because there's 10 other people waiting in line. Are you with me? I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not a real estate kind of a guy, but there may be something happen to those land prices next year, or maybe after November 3rd. I don't know, and I'm not trying to build a conspiracy, but in the case of Jerusalem, the land prices had crashed. They were down low. So if you've got money, there's nothing wrong with this. You buy low and you sell high, right? Isn't that the advice for land and stock and houses? And you buy low and you sell high. If you like gold and silver, you buy low and you sell high. Right, brother? That's what you do. But this has to do with not just the market. This has to do with the people of God. That because of the prevailing conditions, they have forced the land prices to be low. And he's saying, I have not speculated with buying up all the low-priced land. I could have. But these are people that are in need. They're having difficulty. We're here to help them. And to buy their land because the market has crashed isn't a good thing. In verses 17 and 18, Nehemiah has not done this for public consumption, but he's providing a dining table for 150 people a day out of his pocket. HIP National Bank, I call it. HIP National Bank, where your wallet is. Nehemiah is paying for it. I don't know who these 150 people are. I think they're people that are leaders and workers and maybe crew chiefs or something. He's helping some people, and he's paying for it. He's not trying to make a big deal about it. He's not trying to be prideful about it. But in verses 16 through 18, I'll condense it to this statement. Nehemiah was different. Can you speculate in the real estate market? Sure. I'm not saying you don't buy low and sell high. You know, that's part of commerce. That's part of business. But here's a special situation that is affecting the people, the residents of Jerusalem. And he's different than who you expect. Now, from what I see by all these signs, Nehemiah's got some money. Doesn't ever say that, but everything he's doing costs him money. He's not taking the salary or the fringe benefits, and he's laying out money to benefit other people. God has blessed this man somewhere, somehow, to be able to do this. So the only takeaway that I would suggest is, if you come into some money, what would you do? Do you have some things in your heart that you would like to do to be philanthropic, to be beneficial to the community, to help your own family even? We see two reasons that are given here. One is in verse 15. The word in the King James is fear. Now that means awe and respect. It doesn't mean afraid. Fear of God. Awe and respect of God. I'm treating you this way. I'm being Nehemiah for a minute. I'm treating you this way because of who I know God is. Not because you're somebody or nobody. Not because you are connected and you're important. Because of my relationship with God, I'm going to treat you better. Hello? The second reason is that he realizes, this is in verse 18, Nehemiah realizes, and the phrase is, this bondage is heavy on the people. The financial things that are happening in Jerusalem are heavy and taxing and difficult. The different things that have developed. Did I skip something? I think feels like I did. I don't know. But there are different things in this dynamic. But these are the people of God. This is like a big church group because of everybody in Jerusalem that are all Hebrews. They're all Jews. And so, you know, some practice more stringently than others, just like today, you know. Not everybody is a faithful and practicing in their faith, but we see something here, that there's a sharp awareness that Nehemiah has with a tender heart. He's not saving all his money for retirement, to retire in Florida. He's spending a lot of it right here. Because this is, you know, and I don't know how old he is. I don't know, he's between 40 and 50 probably. He's got years to go. He's letting loose of a lot of cash. This is God's huge project to benefit the people of Israel and specifically the people of Jerusalem. And Nehemiah in Israel is remembered as highly favored today in Jerusalem. Today, 2,400 years later, they still know who Nehemiah is. There's still a wall that's named Nehemiah's Wall. I'm looking for the picture that I have when I was there. So let me ask you this to reflect upon. How much weight and effect would the word and the commands of Nehemiah carry if he were not personally an example? If he was just like everybody else, They'll just say, oh, don't pay attention to him. He just says a lot of stuff. But here's a man that's making a tremendous contribution, both in leadership and in finances and work, to the city of Jerusalem. And what he says carries some weight. Now, we don't do things just for the judgment and approval of other people, but we don't avoid it either. That, you know, if you jump on my tipping train, or example, at some point, those people will be glad to see you come in. Right? And when you ask for something above and beyond, it means something. If you're a 1%er, 1% tipper, and you ask for something extra, they will come back and say, the kitchen says no. Well, they probably didn't even ask. Because you don't deserve it. Are you with me? Nehemiah's behavior and his lifestyle and his actions carry weight, and when he says something, it means something. So he's an example of a godly man going, I'll say, the extra mile. He's gone the extra mile in his work and in his finances and in his behavior. And for me, it reflects to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. And Paul uses this phrase, and I believe that this is powerful. It has been powerful in my life personally and on others that I know. And he was explaining why he chose a particular lifestyle for an apostle. Because he was going the extra mile. He was doing over and above what was expected. And those of you that have had employees know something about people that do extra. You know, they show up 10 minutes early and they start working. Now, they don't wait till 8 o'clock when they hit the clock to start work. They're here, and then they stay maybe late, depending on the work. You know. Paul says, we're behaving ourselves this way, that there be no cause for hindrance to the gospel. Living above the rules, not in rebellion, but going beyond the rules, going beyond what's demanded, doing things that are not expected, doing things in attitude, in work, and in finances over and above. I think of a dear lady that was in her church in Alaska when my dad was pastor, and then when I was, she was passed on. But she believed in tithing. And so I was the church treasurer at the time, and we would get these odd checks in the mail at the end of the month, because here was her calculation. Here's my income. I'm going to pay all my household expenses and everything that needs to be paid. Everything that needs to be paid. And then at the end of the month, if there's $32.50 left over, I will write a check to the church for $3.25. Her checks always came in down to the penny, and 10% of what was left over. Well, you may have experienced, don't raise your hand, that there's not any left over at the end of the month. Are you with me? How come there's so much month at the end of the check? But that was her leftover, and then she would faithfully tithe 10% of what was left. And it was usually $3 to $5 and some change. If you're that close with God, if you're that tight with God, if you calculate tithe, if you believe in tithing, if you calculate it like she does, I think you just deserve what you get. Nothing. Just nothing. And my suggestion, and we never did it, but my suggestion as a young firebrand was, look, she's going to need that $3. Why don't we just send that check back to her? She's going to need it because she wasn't in any way operating where God could bless all of her income. Just $3. Yeah. She's canceling God's promise to bless people who give. And I'm not taking an offering tonight, and don't misjudge my intention here. But if you're tight, close with God down to the penny, I'd recommend that you kind of loosen up. For your good. I did a financial seminar in a church not too far from here a few years ago, and some of the people were coming, and they were kind of wondering, we had 5 nights in a row on giving from the Old Testament, from the New Testament, and different examples and techniques and different positions. And they were wondering, at the end of this thing, are we going to take a big offering for Mark? No. So I needed to announce that, I thought, that we're not doing this so that I get some of your money. I'm doing this because I'm trying to keep you from starving to death by giving nothing. Amen. You're about to starve to death, and I'm trying to help your life come to a place of the blessing of God. And, I told them, look, I don't even want your money. Don't give anything in this seminar to me. Nothing. I don't want it. I want to save your life. Because if you're not convinced in your heart about giving to God and the support of His work, you're going to starve to death. You're going to die poor and not understand why. I'll get back to the subject here. No hindrance to the gospel. That we would cause no hindrance to the gospel. I came out of the revolutionary 60s. I don't know what else to call them. Maybe some of you too did also. And when I got saved, I was a hippie. I was a drug-dealing, thieving hippie with long hair, really long. Most of the women were jealous because it was so big and so blonde. It was shoulder wide and long. I found that as I began my time in ministry, that there was a barrier for acceptance. There were a number of people that couldn't get past how I looked to hear what I said. And this verse was given to me. You have things in your life that are hindering the gospel. Yep. What's the matter with those people? Well, plenty, but that's not the point. You just need to think and pray and meditate on that verse. Well, I scheduled a haircut. And we cut 19 inches off. 19-inch ponytail. It's gone. And you know what? Wow. The atmosphere changed. Now I was the same person, just not quite so rebellious. You understand? I was voluntarily providing a hindrance to the gospel. And it meant a lot to me then. Doesn't now. I got over it. I eliminated that hindrance without blaming other people. If short hair helps you, let's do it. I wanted to be heard. I wanted to be understood. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be recognized. I wanted to communicate effectively and properly. And something was getting in the way, and so I fixed it. Dress went the same way. Some places, not appropriate to wear this. Well, they'll just have to live with it and get over it. No, you adjust. You adjust so that nothing is a hindrance to the gospel. If they don't find an excuse to reject Jesus because of something I am or something I'm doing, you adjust. So that brings up a point that this is far more than following some set of rules or a written code of ethics. And it goes into an area that a lot of people think is unreasonable in its expectations, and that has to do with sacrificing your rights. We have been primed and told and trained that you have rights and you're not to give those up. Fight for your rights. I have rights in this situation. Well, would sacrificing some of your rights make your ministry more effective? And would you consider that purchase? Nehemiah in verse 19 does not ask to be remembered by people, but to be remembered by God. There's a key for us, right there. And if you have to give up your rights to make your ministry, the presentation of your church in Miami, more effective, to reach farther, are you willing to do that? This is way beyond expectations. I'm sailing into uncharted territory for most of you. To give up stuff. To give up your hope for a career that you've invested in education and work and finances in. And if God calls you to go to a certain place, that you're willing to give that up without a big fight.